Hey, can I copy your homework? Yeah, just change it a bit so it doesn't look like you copied it. Shout out all my Honkai Impact 3rd players. I'm getting a bit of deja vu since that game just released a character only 3 or 4 months ago that sleeps on a giant cushion and has 2 summons just like Citlali does. Citlali is our 3rd crowd catalyst, and she's an elemental mastery scaling shielder that can provide a plethora of buffs via her builds. Starting off with her elemental skill, this is where she summons her shield and restores 24 Night Soul points for her special Notland stamina bar. Once her Night Soul stamina bar reaches 50 points, her summon with the goofy googly eyes will get angry and then summon an ice storm around your character to deal cryo damage every second. This ice storm has an internal cooldown of 2 seconds, so that means every other hit will apply cryo, and she's essentially like Rosaria, who also applies cryo at a rate of once every 2 seconds. Now you may be thinking, how do I actually get that ice storm to start if it requires 50 Night Soul points and her skill only restores 24 Night Soul points? Well, that's where we talk about Citlali's elemental burst. Her burst will deal AoE damage in front of her and then deals additional damage based on how many enemies were tagged by the initial hit. The initial burst hit will restore 24 Night Soul points, and the follow-up explosion will restore 3 Night Soul points per enemy up to a total of 9 Night Soul points. That means even in single target situations, with Citlali's skill and burst, you'll be able to get 51 Night Soul points and summon the Ice Storm from her skill to get solid cryo application for about 6 seconds. But because the Ice Storm continually drains Citlali's Night Soul points once you cross that 50 point threshold, usually we're looking to get as much Night Soul points as possible to extend the Ice Storm's uptime. To do that without any external cooldown reduction sources from weapon passives or other characters, you're going to want to take advantage of her Ascension passive. Her first Ascension passive grants 16 Night Soul points whenever your party triggers a melt or freeze reaction, and this usually happens twice per rotation since it does have an 8-second cooldown. Additionally, this passive also shreds 20% Pyro and Hydro Res for 12 seconds, which is one of the most important parts of her kit that define what her best teams are, but more on that in the team section later. Her 4th Ascension passive grants an extra 4 Night Soul points per rotation even as a solo Notland character, and increases the damage of her Ice Storm and Burst based on her elemental mastery. The latter point is definitely nice since you're building EM for shield strength and you'll get a little bit of damage in the process. However, as you'll see in the artifact and weapon sections, Citlali's damage isn't actually anything crazy, and most players will opt to run support builds that allow Citlali to buff the team's damage rather than her personal damage. When it comes to Citlali's builds, artifacts are definitely the simpler part of her build. As a Notland support, there's no doubt that the 4-set scroll of the hero of Cinder City is her best artifact set, given that she can fully unlock the 40% damage bonus for 2 of her team's elements. Additionally, as we just discussed, Citlali's elemental burst is extremely important for activating her Ice Storm from her skill, and thus she needs to have her burst up every rotation. The 6 flat energy from the 2-set scroll helps immensely with that, and if you run other artifact sets, you're going to have a larger emphasis on energy recharge, which does not allow you to build for a stronger shield with elemental mastery stats. That's why every other artifact set besides the 4-set scroll have huge opportunity costs and are very situational. Probably the biggest candidate for use on Citlali is the 4-set Tenacity of the Millilith, which can give Citlali's shield some shield strength and also buff the attack percent of your team. This set is mainly used for teams where you already have a 4-set scroll user like Shilonen, but even in that case there is an argument that Shilonen would be run on the 4-set Archaic Petra and Citlali would be run on the 4-set scroll due to her reliance on its energy refund. For artifact stats, you're going to want triple elemental mastery in the Sands, Goblet, and Circlet for your standard build, with energy recharge as a viable option in the Sands for those without good energy substats. In the worst case scenario where Citlali is a solo crowd character and her team doesn't generate great energy naturally or with weapons like Favonius, her energy requirements can be up to 180% plus energy recharge. But if you know for sure you're running a double crowd character, a character with Favonius on the team, one of the weapons that helps Citlali generate her own energy particles, or just run a team with naturally good energy generation, that number can decrease to 160% and below. Of course, that high energy requirement means her highest priority substat is going to be energy recharge until the benchmark numbers, and elemental mastery as your second priority. Other offensive stats like attack percent and crit stats can fill out your remaining focuses, but these are much less of a priority, and it's okay if your pieces don't have much of them and instead have defensive stats like HP or defense. Moving into Citlali's weapons, this is where things get a little more situational and you're going to have to put your thinking cap on to make some decisions based on what you need on your account. Now, technically, her signature catalyst, Starcaller's Watch, is her best in slot catalyst. However, would I say this weapon is worth your primo gems if you don't have much to spend? Absolutely not. Some of the pros of this catalyst are that it grants a hefty amount of EM for shield strength, and its passive grants a damage percent buff that benefits all types of carries, regardless of whether they scale with attack percent, defense percent, or HP percent. On the flip side, some of the cons of this catalyst are that there is a very great substitute for buffing your main carry, and there are also other options that provide useful utility that her signature lacks. The great substitute for her signature catalyst in terms of buffing power is the tried and true Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers. What this 3-star weapon does really well is that it condenses the buffing power onto one character, which is great for hyper carry teams like the new Mavuika Melt team with Citlali. However, this weapon cannot be used for non-attack scalers, and its lack of energy recharge or elemental mastery main stat really puts pressure on your shield strength since you're forced to build a ton of energy recharge via artifacts instead. I know there are a handful of people who for some reason have a vendetta against the Thrilling Tales catalyst, but there's no denying that this catalyst and Citlali's signature are two of her best options. But for those that are looking for some 4 or 5-star alternatives, you're in great hands. What I believe to be Citlali's best 4-star option is the Sacrificial Fragments. Not only does this catalyst have a high EM stat and a low base attack, the skill cooldown reset on its passive effectively grants Citlali extra energy and extra Night Soul points as well. 1000 Floating Dreams is a rare but great 5-star EM stat stick that can provide Citlali with respectable personal damage thanks to its small EM and elemental damage bonus buffs from its passive. And last but not least, if you're looking for a craftable weapon to use, then Fruit of Fulfillment has a hefty energy recharge main stat and also grants a small amount of EM for Citlali. While it's nothing great like the Sacrificial Fragments, it's most definitely a serviceable option as a craftable. When it comes to team building with Citlali, thanks to her first Ascension passive that shreds Pyro and Hydro Res with a Melt or Freeze reaction, a lot of her best teams will be enabling Melt teams. However, because her Crow application is slow at a rate of once every 2 seconds, the biggest beneficiaries from Citlali's release are going to be Pyro carries with slow Pyro application, or Pyro carries that get a lot of hits in and are fine with just occasionally melting a few of their many hits. Today we won't be covering every single possible team with Citlali since she's such a flexible defensive and offensive support option at the same time, but rest assured we will be covering most of the important and game-changing teams with her addition to the Genshin cast. And the first and possibly biggest upgrade with Citlali's release when it comes to overall playability is Gaming Melt teams. Previously, Gaming teams were stuck with the Circle Impact gameplay. For those who don't know what I mean by that, basically aside from C6 Kaya, his team's Crow application were stuck to units that had stationary elemental bursts such as Rosaria, a Crow infused Kazuha burst, etc., and that's not even including Bennett's Circle Impact as well. Citlali not only provides the same Crow application as a unit like Rosaria or Kazuha, but her shield and Ice Storm protect Gaming from interruption and follow him around, which is an insane quality of life for a character that has so much mobility in his kit. In the final 2 slots, usually you just want 2 buffers because Gaming is a bona fide hyper carry, especially if you have your C6. Just make sure that if you're not running Bennett, your team does have enough energy generation to fund Gaming's burst, whether that be through Favonius weapons or just natural energy generation. With the defensive utility already covered thanks to Citlali, that means you can take any combination of Shilonin, Bennett, Kazuha, Sucrose, Shenyun, and even Lynette. Lynette's burst has a unique quality of prioritizing Cryo for its infusion unlike other Animo abilities, so she is a potential option for a 4-set Viridescent Veneer buffer if you want a simpler setup to swirl Pyro, but don't want to infuse her burst with Pyro to mess up Gaming's melt reactions. Unlike Gaming, Arlecchino already has a ton of playable team setups before Citlali's release. When it comes to adding Citlali into your Arlecchino teams, it's very much a luxury upgrade as opposed to a game-changing scenario. Arlecchino by herself is already so strong, and Zhongli provides the same res shred and a much stronger shield, but now you have the option to sacrifice some of that shield strength in exchange for massive buffs from Citlali's artifact and weapon builds. You want to replace Zhongli with Citlali in a vaporized team? Go ahead. You want to replace Zhongli in a double pyro double geo team and change the archetype to no longer have double geo? Go ahead. You want to replace Zhongli and make a rainbow team with Arlecchino? Go ahead. The point I'm trying to make here is that Arlecchino is already such a strong pyro carry, and it's really hard to mess up when you're giving her a premium support with Citlali. Remember, Arlecchino is a fast pyro attacker that doesn't melt every normal attack she does, so even getting a precise elemental setup isn't necessary for Citlali to be a fantastic support for Arlecchino. All you need is the res shred from her Ascension passive, the 4-set scroll of the Hero of Cinder City, and any other bonuses from her weapon passives. Mavuika Melt is the premier hypercarry playstyle for the first patch with our playable Pyro Archon, and Citlali is the backbone of that playstyle. I won't really cover this team thoroughly today since I have a whole Mavuika guide you can check out on my channel that covers the intricacies of the team, but as a brief overview, here's what you need to know. Citlali's cryo application isn't strictly better than other characters like Rosaria or C6 Kaya, so you can substitute Citlali out, but because this is a Citlali video, we won't be doing that today. Doing a jump cancel between your 4th and 5th charge attacks on Mavuika does allow you to get more than the standard 2 melts on charge attacks with a cryo applicator like Citlali. But what really makes Citlali stand out is the fact that her Night Soul point consumption with her Ice Storm drastically increases Mavuika's damage for her next burst, and all those other cryo applicators cannot run the 4-set scroll of the Hero of Cinder City with its full effects. Gaming, Arlecchino, and Mavuika are the 3 main pyro carries you want to run Citlali with, but as I said before, she's a super flexible support. Out of all the other pyro carries, Lyney is probably the next character up when it comes to candidates for utilizing Citlali's support. As a charged attack bow character, Citlali's resistance to interruption via shielding is immensely important to his damage output. Not only that, if you melt a charge attack, you'll do great damage. If you're not melting a charge attack, Lyney's passive that grants him a minimum of 60% pyro damage bonus against enemies affected by pyro also makes him do great damage. Essentially, there's just much less opportunity cost tied to whether or not Lyney is actually getting melts from Citlali's cryo application, and all the other buffs and shielding that she provides most definitely outclasses Zhongli unless you absolutely need that unbreakable shield. For those looking to run Citlali with other frail pyro carries like Yoimiya or Klee, she's most definitely a great option for general buffing, but there isn't much in terms of true synergy. So instead of going down the list of pyro carries, I want to mention 2 non-pyro units that reap the most benefit from Citlali's introduction. The first of those 2 is Chasca. Prior to Citlali, Orodon was the only viable option to hold the 4-set scroll of the Hero of Cinder City in Chasca's teams, unless you wanted to run Shilonen and lose value out of Chasca's passive that promotes using Pyro, Cryo, Hydro, and Electro teammates. Now, not only do we have a second 4-set scroll user with Citlali, but resistance to interruption from shielding is also a very valuable benefit for Chasca, who is frail and has a very long knockback animation when interrupted during her skill. To get value out of Citlali's Red Shred and Ascension passive, for the final 2 slots, you're going to want at least 1 pyro character. That means a common team setup includes Chasca, Citlali, either Bennett or Mavuika in the 3rd slot, and then a flex slot. The flex slot can be Hydro buffers like Farina or Mona, Cryo buffers like Shenhe, Ganyu, and Rosaria, or off-field Electro units / buffers like Orodon, Fischl, Yai, Beidou, and C6 Kujo Sara. And last but not least, the final character to cover today is none other than Neuvillette himself. We kinda glossed over it this entire video, but Citlali's Ascension passive also reduces Hydro res upon triggering a melt or freeze reaction as well. The reason why we didn't talk about it much is because there's not many characters that actually utilize the Hydro res shred, since most freeze carries are cryo characters and freeze isn't a great archetype against boss enemies. C0 Neuvillette in particular is a stellar beneficiary from Citlali's Ascension passive, not just because he is a Hydro carry, but also because he isn't reliant on freeze and he very much appreciates the resistance to interruption without his constellations. As for who Citlali replaces in Neuvillette teams, wherever you'd run Baizhu or Zhongli, that's usually who you'd want to swap out for Citlali. An example team would be Neuvillette, Farina, Citlali, and then a flex slot, which could be Kazuha, Shilonen, or a healer like Charlotte or Jean to stack Farina's fanfare faster. But with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this Citlali guide, and most importantly, I hope this guide was helpful for building the perfect Citlali for your account. Other than that, it's the same as always. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.